Vincent "Vinny Knuckles" Marchetti should have paid more attention when he walked into the Vesuvio restaurant on Mulberry Street that Thursday evening in 1946. Should have noticed which table the older men were carefully avoiding. Should have seen how everyone gave a particular chair the same wide berth they'd give a rattlesnake coiled in the corner. But Vinny was 24 years old, newly returned from World War II, full of himself and his stories about liberating Italy from the Niam. He'd been a sergeant in the army, had seen combat, had medals pinned to his uniform at the discharge ceremony. He thought he'd earned respect, thought he deserved to be treated like someone important. So, when Vinny walked into Vesuvio's at 7:15 p.m. and saw an empty table in the corner, a prime spot, quiet, with a good view of the restaurant, he walked straight over and sat down. Picked the chair facing the door, the power position, the seat that let you see everyone who came and went. The entire restaurant went silent. The waiter, a thin older man named Carlo, went pale. He approached Vinny's table with trembling hands. Sir, you can't sit there." "Why not? It's empty." "That's Mr. Luciano's table. That's his chair. Nobody sits there, ever." Vinny laughed. "Luciano? Lucky Luciano? That guy got deported. He's in Italy. He's not coming back. So the chair's empty, and I'm sitting in it." Carlo looked around desperately for help. The restaurant owner was in the kitchen. The other waiters were frozen, unsure what to do. This had never happened before. "Please," Carlo said, "just move to another table. Any other table. This one is reserved." "Reserved for who?" "A guy who's not even in the country." That's when the door opened, and Charles "Lucky" Luciano walked in. This is the story of what happened when a young veteran who didn't know the rules sat in the most powerful mob boss's chair. The story of 1 minute that taught Vinny Marchetti a lesson about respect he'd never forget. And the story of how Lucky Luciano, despite being officially deported from the United States, still controlled New York from 3,000 miles away. To understand what happened that night at Vesuvio's, you need to understand Lucky Luciano's situation in 1946. Luciano had been arrested in 1936 on prostitution charges he probably didn't commit, assembled by an ambitious prosecutor named Thomas Dewey, who needed a big conviction to build his political career. Luciano was convicted and sentenced to 30 to 50 years in prison. He served nearly 10 years. Then World War II created an opportunity. The U.S. Navy needed help securing the New York docks against German sabotage. They also needed intelligence for the invasion of Sicily. Who better to provide both than the Mafia, which controlled the docks and had deep connections in Sicily? The government made a deal with Luciano. Help with the war effort, and they'd commute his sentence. Luciano agreed, provided intelligence, used his connections, helped the Navy. In 1946, Luciano was released from prison and immediately deported to Italy. The official story was that he was gone, banned from ever returning to the United States. But reality was more complicated. Luciano was in constant contact with his organization in New York. He communicated through coded messages, through intermediaries, through systems that kept him informed of everything happening in his criminal empire. And periodically, despite the deportation order, Luciano would quietly slipped back into the United States to handle business personally. October 1946 was one of those times. Luciano had flown from Italy to Cuba, then taken a private boat to the Florida coast. From there, he'd traveled by car to New York, using fake identification, staying in safe houses, keeping a low profile. He was in New York for 1 week only, meeting with his top lieutenants, addressing issues that required his personal attention. Nobody was supposed to know he was in the country. But in Little Italy, word traveled. People saw him, recognized him despite attempts at disguise. And within hours, everyone in the neighborhood knew. Lucky Luciano was back. The Vesuvio restaurant had been Luciano's regular spot since the 1920s. He'd eaten there hundreds of times, always sat at the same table in the corner, always in the chair facing the door. That table, that chair, had become sacred in Little Italy. Even when Luciano was in prison, even after he was deported, nobody sat there. It was understood. That was Luciano's table, his chair. Sitting there was like sitting on a throne that wasn't yours. It was disrespect of the highest order. The restaurant owner, Giuseppe Moretti, had been explicit with his staff. That table is reserved, always. Even if Mr. Luciano never comes back, even if he's dead, nobody sits there, ever. Understand? Everyone understood. Until Vinnie Marchetti walked in. Vinnie was the son of immigrants, grew up in Little Labul, Italy, joined the army in 1943, spent 2 years in Europe. He'd left as a kid and come back as a man, or at least he thought he had. He'd seen war, killed men, earned medals. In his mind, he was owed respect. What Vinnie didn't understand was that military service, while honorable, didn't translate to respect in the mob world. In that world, hierarchy was different. History was different. And sitting in Lucky Luciano's chair, regardless of your military record, was an unforgivable insult. Lucky Luciano walked into Vesuvio's at 7:16 p.m., 1 minute after Vinnie had sat down. He was wearing an expensive suit, a fedora, and dark glasses despite the evening hour. 2 bodyguards flanked him, large men, clearly armed, clearly not to be trifled with. The restaurant owner, Giuseppe, rushed forward. "Mr. Luciano, we didn't know you were coming tonight. Your table is—" He stopped mid-sentence. Saw Vinnie sitting in Luciano's chair. Luciano removed his sunglasses slowly. Looked at the corner table. Saw a young man he didn't recognize sitting in his chair, looking comfortable, looking like he belonged there. "Who's that?" Luciano asked quietly. "I don't know his name. He just sat down. Carlo tried to tell him, 'Get everyone else out.' Sir? Everyone else, all the other customers. Tell them dinner's on the house tonight, but they need to leave. Now. Private business." Giuseppe moved quickly, went to each table, apologized profusely, explained that something urgent had come up. Within 3 minutes, the restaurant was empty except for Vinnie, still sitting in Luciano's chair, and the staff. Vinnie was starting to realize something was wrong. The sudden exodus of customers, the tension in the air, the way the waiters were looking at him, with what appeared to be pity. He started to stand up. "Sit down," Luciano said. His voice was calm, but carried across the restaurant like a gunshot. Vinny froze, half standing, looked toward the door, saw Luciano standing there, with his two bodyguards. "You lucky Luciano?" Vinny asked. "I am, and you're sitting in my chair." "I didn't know," the waiter said, "but I thought, you're supposed to be in Italy." "Clearly I'm not in Italy. I'm here, and you're in my chair." Vinny tried to laugh it off. "Look, I'm sorry. I didn't mean any disrespect. I'm just a veteran. Got back from the war. Just wanted a nice dinner." "What's your name?" "Vincent Marchetti. Vinny. I'm from the neighborhood. My family's been here for—" "I don't care about your family. I care that you're sitting in my chair. My chair. In my restaurant. Without permission. That's disrespect." I said I'm sorry. "I'll move." "No problem." Vinny started to get up again. Luciano held up his hand. "Don't move. Stay exactly where you are." Vinny sat back down. His heart was pounding now. This wasn't going the way he'd expected. He'd thought maybe he'd get yelled at, embarrassed, kicked out. But the way Luciano was looking at him, the way the bodyguards were positioned, this felt more serious. "You were in the war?" Luciano asked. "Yes, sir. Army, sergeant, fought in Italy, helped liberate. I know what happened in Italy. I helped make it happen. My connections, my intelligence, helped the army land in Sicily. You know that?" Vinny didn't know that. Most soldiers didn't, but he nodded anyway. "So you're a war hero," Luciano continued. "You think that means you can do whatever you want? Sit wherever you want? Disrespect whoever you want?" "No, sir. I made a mistake. I apologize." "Apologizing isn't enough. You need to understand why you're apologizing. You need to learn a lesson." Luciano walked closer. His bodyguard stayed near the door, blocking any exit. Luciano pulled out a chair from an adjacent table, turned it around, sat down facing Vinny. "Let me tell you a story," Luciano said. "In 1931, Luciano began, I organized something, a restructuring of how our business worked. Before then, we had bosses who thought they were kings, who thought their personal power was more important than the organization, who made decisions based on ego instead of business sense. I changed that. Organized the families into a commission, created structure, created rules, and one of those rules was about respect, not the kind of respect you demand through fear. The kind of respect you earn through position, through achievement, through what you build. That chair you're sitting in, that's not just a chair. That's a symbol. It represents 15 years of me coming to this restaurant, conducting business, making decisions that affected thousands of people. It represents the owner, Giuseppe, trusting me enough to always keep that table available. It represents every person in this neighborhood understanding that certain things are sacred. And you, a kid who just got back from the war, you walk in here and sit in it like it's nothing. Like those 15 years don't matter. Like the rules don't apply to you. Vinny was sweating now. "Mr. Luciano, I swear I didn't know. Nobody told me. I'm new back to the neighborhood." That's the problem, Luciano said. You think being new is an excuse. But ignorance doesn't excuse disrespect. When you walk into a place, any place, you watch, you observe, you see what other people are doing. You notice which tables are empty and ask yourself why. You don't just assume you can take whatever you want. Yes, sir. I understand now. Do you? Luciano leaned forward. Because I'm going to give you a choice. And this choice is going to teach you more about respect than anything else could. Choice 1. You stand up right now and leave this restaurant. Never come back. We forget this happened. You go. Live your life. Stay out of my business. And we're done. Choice 2. You stay. Finish your dinner. In my chair. But you acknowledge that you're only sitting there because I'm allowing it. Because I'm showing you mercy. And in return you owe me a favor. Someday I'll call on you for something. And you'll do it. No questions. No hesitation. Whatever I ask. Vinny looked at Luciano. This was a test. He could walk away with his pride intact, but prove he was scared. Or he could stay, finish his meal, but bind himself to Lucky Luciano with a debt he'd have to repay. I'll stay, Vinny said quietly. Luciano smiled. Smart. You'll finish your dinner. I'll sit here and we'll talk. You'll tell me about the war. I'll tell you about the neighborhood. And when you're done eating, you'll leave. And you'll remember this night every time you have to make a decision about respect. What happened next was surreal. Lucky Luciano, one of the most powerful mob bosses in American history, sat with Vinny Marchetti for 90 minutes and had dinner. They talked about the war. Vinny described the fighting in Italy. Luciano listened, asked questions, seemed genuinely interested. He told Vinny about Sicily, about the towns Vinny had helped liberate, about the families who lived there. They talked about New York, about how the neighborhood had changed during the war, about which businesses had survived, which had failed, about families who'd lost sons overseas. The restaurant staff served them both. Giuseppe himself brought the food, clearly confused, but following Luciano's lead. Whatever was happening, it was Luciano's decision. At one point, Vinny asked, Mr. Luciano, why are you being nice to me? I disrespected you. You could have... people have been killed for less, haven't they? Luciano set down his fork. Yes, they have. But killing you accomplishes what? Makes me feel powerful for a minute? Scares a few people? That's small thinking. Instead, I'm investing. I'm teaching you about respect, about how things work, about the value of understanding your place. And I'm creating a debt. Someday, maybe next month, maybe 10 years from now, I'll need something. And you'll remember this night. You'll remember that I showed you mercy. And you'll do what I ask. That's worth more than your death. At 9 p.m., they finished eating. Luciano stood up, extended his hand. Vinny shook it. The chair is yours for tonight, Luciano said. Tomorrow it's mine again. Even if I'm in Italy, even if I'm dead, it's mine. Understand? Yes, sir. Good. Now get out of here. And remember, you owe me. Vinny left, walked out into the Little Italy night, his mind reeling from what had just happened. Vinny Marchetti never sat in that chair again, never even looked at it when he visited Vesuvio's. He ate there occasionally over the years. Giuseppe always welcomed him, treated him well, but Vinny always requested tables far from the corner. For 8 years, Vinny lived his life. Got married, had kids, worked in construction, stayed out of trouble, stayed away from the mob. Then in 1954, he received a visit. 2 men came to his apartment, well-dressed, polite, but clearly connected. "Mr. Luciano sends his regards," one of them said. "He has a favor to ask." The favor was simple. Luciano needed someone to deliver a package from New York to Miami. Someone not connected to the mob. Someone who wouldn't be watched by the FBI. Someone who owed a debt. "What's in the package?" Vinny asked. "Does it matter?" Vinny thought about this, thought about that night in 1946. About sitting in Luciano's chair. About the choice he'd made. "No," Vinny said, "it doesn't matter. When do I leave?" He made the delivery. Never knew what was in the package. Never asked. Came back to New York and resumed his normal life. The debt was paid. Lucky Luciano died in 1962 at Naples Airport in Italy, where he'd gone to meet with a movie producer. He was 64 years old. His body was returned to the United States for burial. The one time after his deportation that he officially came back. At the funeral in New York, thousands attended. The procession through Little Italy drew crowds. And at Vesuvio's restaurant, the corner table remained empty, reserved, exactly as it had been for 30 years. Vinny Marchetti attended the funeral, stood in the back, paid his respects. When the crowd dispersed, he walked to Vesuvio's. Giuseppe was standing outside, watching the procession pass. "The table?" Vinny asked. "Will remain reserved," Giuseppe said. "Forever. Mr. Luciano may be gone, but his memory stays." The corner table at Vesuvio's remained empty for the next 15 years. In 1977, the restaurant closed. Giuseppe died. His children didn't want to continue the business. The space became a bakery, then a clothing store, then a coffee shop. But the story of Lucky Luciano's chair lived on in Little Italy. Became one of those legends people told to illustrate the old days, when respect meant something, when even sitting in the wrong chair could have consequences. In 1985, a journalist writing about the history of organized crime in New York tracked down Vincent Marchetti. Vinny was 63 years old, retired, living in New Orleans, Jersey. "I wanted to ask you about the night you sat in Lucky Luciano's chair," the journalist said. Vinny laughed. "That story's still going around?" "It's famous. What do you remember about it?" Vinny was quiet for a moment. "I remember being young and stupid, thinking I was entitled to something because I'd served in the war, thinking rules didn't apply to me. And I remember Luciano teaching me that respect isn't about what you've done. It's about understanding your place, understanding history, understanding that some things are bigger than your personal ego. That chair wasn't just a chair. It was everything Luciano had built, everything he represented. And by sitting in it without permission, I was saying none of that mattered, that I was more important than all of it. Luciano could have killed me. Should have, probably, by the rules of his world. But he was smart. He knew that teaching me a lesson was worth more than making an example. So he sat with me, talked to me, showed me mercy, and created a debt I'd have to repay. That's genius when you think about it. That's why he was Lucky Luciano. He saw opportunities where other people saw problems. Do you regret it? Sitting in the chair? Yes and no. I regret disrespecting him. I regret being ignorant. But I don't regret what I learned. That night changed how I saw the world, made me think before acting, made me understand that respect is earned through awareness, through understanding context, through knowing your place. Those are lessons worth learning, even if the tuition was sitting across from Lucky Luciano, wondering if I'd leave that restaurant alive. That wraps it up for today. October 1946. Vesuvio's restaurant. Vincent Vinny Knuckles Marchetti sat in Lucky Luciano's chair. 60 seconds later, Luciano walked in, back from deportation, in New York secretly, and absolutely aware someone was in his sacred chair. Luciano cleared the restaurant, gave Vinny a choice: leave forever or stay and owe a debt. Vinny stayed, had dinner with the most powerful mob boss in America, and 8 years later paid his debt by delivering a mysterious package to Miami. 1 chair, 1 minute. 1 lesson about respect that Vinny Marchetti never forgot. If this story hit you, drop a comment below. Subscribe for more stories where one small mistake teaches a lifetime lesson. See you in the next one.